For a moment, the entire cemetery fell silent, so silent that visitors later said they could hear the flutter of a single flag at half-staff. And then, in the middle of that stillness, came one unexpected action from Senator Michael Kennedy that would soon spread across the nation like a spark through dry grass. What he did lasted no more than a minute, but for many Americans, it changed everything. It started as an ordinary, crisp November morning at Arlington National Cemetery, where the marble rows stretched endlessly toward the horizon and the wind carried the soft murmur of history. Kennedy, usually composed, measured, and not prone to emotional displays, was scheduled to attend a small remembrance ceremony honoring 3 fallen service members recently returned home. It was not an event meant for cameras or grand speeches. The families wanted quiet. The Pentagon agreed. Kennedy came mostly because the youngest of the fallen, Private Jonathan Hale, had once written to his office asking for better mental health support for new recruits. Hale never lived to see the reforms that letter inspired. The ceremony proceeded as expected: folded flags, trembling hands, the metallic cry of a bugle. But when the families began leaving, Kennedy's staff gently touched his shoulder, reminding him of a scheduled meeting on Capitol Hill. He nodded, distracted, eyes fixed instead on an elderly man struggling with a cane near Section 60, a part of Arlington where the most recent war casualties rest. What happened next was not scripted, not political, not even noticed at first. Kennedy broke from his staff and walked quietly toward the old man. The man wore a weathered army jacket, its patches nearly threadbare, and in his hand he held a small, folded piece of paper shaking as though it carried more weight than it should. He was trying, with difficulty, to kneel before a grave. Kennedy didn't ask who he was visiting. He didn't seek cameras. Instead, he did something that would soon resonate deeply with millions. He bowed, placed his own knee gently onto the cold ground, and without a word offered the man his arm. Together, slowly, painfully, they lowered themselves to the earth beside the stone. Witnesses later said it was the expression on the old man's face that caught their breath, a mixture of grief, gratitude, and the release of a burden he'd been carrying for decades. The man read aloud, voice breaking, a letter he had written to his son in 2004 but never mailed. When he faltered, Kennedy held the paper steady for him. When he wept, Kennedy didn't look away. There were no reporters nearby, just a few visitors who instinctively lowered their phones out of respect. But one woman, herself a Gold Star assister, captured a single wide shot, not of Kennedy's face, not of the grieving father's tears, but of 2 silhouettes kneeling in the long grass with the sun behind them, sharing one moment of human compassion. She uploaded the image with no caption. Within hours, it had reached every corner of the country. At first, people didn't even know what they were seeing. Many assumed Kennedy was comforting a family member. Others thought he was visiting a fallen soldier from his own home state. It was only when the visitor who had taken the photograph shared the full story that the truth emerged. Kennedy had simply seen someone in pain and refused to walk past. Suddenly, the nation was talking not about politics, but about empathy. News outlets replayed interviews with witnesses who described how Kennedy stayed nearly 20 minutes after the man finished his letter, helping him back to his feet, listening as he spoke of the son he lost, the regrets that kept him awake at night, and the pride he still carried like a final medal pinned to his heart. Kennedy told him quietly, but firmly, that his son's service would not be forgotten. And then, before leaving, he placed 3 small stones at the base of the marker, one for the fallen soldier, one for the father, and one, he said, to hold the memory steady. The father later told reporters he had no idea who Kennedy was until a staffer finally approached to escort the senator back to his schedule. "I thought he was just another visitor being kind," he said. Maybe that's exactly who he was. The moment sparked conversations across dinner tables, classrooms, and congressional hearing rooms. People began sharing their own story of acts of kindness from strangers, memories of loved ones who served, reminders that connections still mattered in a world divided by noise. Veterans groups praised the senator not for grandstanding, but for doing something many felt the country desperately needed: slowing down, listening, remembering that grief never fully disappears and that honoring sacrifice is not reserved for crowded ceremonies or televised addresses. Even critics of Kennedy's policies admitted the moment felt genuinely raw, unplanned, and deeply human. When reporters finally asked him about it, Kennedy kept his response brief: "The man wasn't alone. No one who comes here should ever feel alone." In the weeks that followed, Congress moved forward on a bipartisan bill expanding mental health support for veterans and military families, an effort that gained surprising momentum after the Arlington moment went viral. Lawmakers cited the image repeatedly during debates, calling it a reminder of what was at stake. But beyond political impact, the moment delivered something else, something quieter, but more powerful. It reminded people that healing sometimes begins with a single gesture, a hand offered, a grief shared, a life honored without expectation of recognition, a small act that ripples outward until it touches those who never expected to feel its warmth. And so, the photo of two kneeling shadows at Arlington remains, pinned to refrigerators, printed in newspapers, saved on phone as an image not of a senator and a stranger but of compassion in its simplest form. In a year marked by division and uncertainty, Americans found in that fleeting moment a reason to hope, a reason to believe that humanity still lives in the spaces between headlines. Because Kennedy's simple act wasn't about politics, it was about presence. And sometimes, presence is the most powerful thing we can give.